Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed this week's episode in Austin, Texas. What an amazing city and an amazing state. I gotta tell you, they say everything's bigger in Texas, and they're right. My 3 bucket list species for this show were the blue catfish, the smallmouth buffalo, and the one I'm most excited about, the Guadalupe Bass. It was an interesting show because when you think of Texas, you think of hot, warm weather. But fishing conditions for this shoot were really cold. We were on the heels of a major cold front. In that part of Texas, they rarely see freezing temperatures. They saw it 3 nights in a row. So fishing was tough, but we captured all 3 species. For the blue cat, we used a setup that I call a Carolina rig, which is basically a weight, a bead, a barrel swivel, and then about a 3 or 4 foot leader to a 2/0 VMC circle hook. We used a piece of cut gizzard shad, which is a favorite for catfish, and we ended up catching a blue cat well over 30 pounds. Pretty amazing, big fish in Austin, Texas. The smallmouth buffalo was a species I'd never caught before. Believe it or not, it looks like a carp, but it is not a carp. If the fish doesn't have barbels, it's not a carp. We used the European method of carp fishing to catch the barbel. Basically used a 12-foot rod. We set up 2 or 3 rods at a time, put them on rod holders with fish alarms, and we used a concoction of dough bait. And we used a specialized hook and weight system called a hair rig. And that hair rig utilizes a little tiny hook, about a number 1 hook, with a piece of braid off the end of it. And on that braid, you stick a boilie. And tough conditions, we had 1 bite, but it resulted in a 48-pound smallmouth buffalo. Fish of a lifetime, and a new species for me to check off my bucket list. But last and not least, in Austin, when you're in Texas, man, you got to bass fish. And I had 3 opportunities to chase bass in Austin. The first was on Lady Bird Lake, and I got to fish the main body. And because the fishing was tough, the cold front had made those fish suspend. And we caught all our bass really deep, but suspended. And the fish came over 15 to 20 foot of water, but they only came about 8 or 10 feet down. And I threw a crankbait. It's a Rapala DT10 in a color called blueback herring. And 90% of the time I'm trying to bang this stuff off the bottom. But because I saw fish suspended on the graph, I wanted a plug that ran about 10 feet. That's where I saw the fish suspended. DT10 was perfect. I used it on 12-pound, 100% Berkeley trilene fluorocarbon. I used the brand new Ike Abu rod in the delay series, 7-foot delay series. And our delay series, if you look at this rod, it's real parabolic. It's composite, so it's graphite and glass mixed. And when you're fishing a crankbait, that's the action rod you want. Last, I used a slower gear ratio. Cold front conditions, I wanted to slow myself down. I used the Abu Garcia Ike Series Revo in the 6:6-1. My second opportunity to fish in Austin was in a place called Barton Springs. Barton Springs is extremely clear. Looking 10 foot down, you could see a penny on the bottom and you could read the date. That's how clear it is. We saw some blimps. I mean, legitimate 10-pound fish. Couldn't get them to bite, but we did catch some really quality fish on one of the most versatile rigs for clear water you could fish. And that is a wacky rig. I used a Berkeley Powerbait Max Scent General in 5-inch. Used a green pumpkin cinnamon brown color. And I want to show you a little trick that I did with this thing is I used an O-ring to save these baits. And this is just a little tool by VMC. It's got a bunch of these little rubber rings on the end. And you stick the open end of that tool onto the bait. You pull that little ring off of that tool. It's onto the bait, position it right in the middle. And now when I go to rig this hook, I'm going to go under that ring. And by the way, I used a #1 weedless Nico hook by VMC. I go under that ring, and now I have a wacky rig that won't pull off as easy. And you could catch a lot more fish by using that little ring. Caught some real nice fish in Barton Springs on that. Largemouth bass. The rod and reel, I used the Abu Garcia Ike Series rod, 7-foot medium action. And I paired that with the Abu Garcia Revo Ike reel in the size 20. My line, my all-time favorite all-purpose line matchup, it's 15-pound Berkeley X9 braid with a 8-pound Berkeley Trilene 100% fluorocarbon leader. Great combination for light tackle fishing. And last but not least, the final fish on my bucket list was the Guadalupe bass. Really cool subspecies, different species of bass. I've caught largemouth, I've caught smallmouth, I've caught spots, I've caught red eye, I've caught shoal bass, but I've never caught a Guadalupe. And fishing for these Guadalupe in the lower Colorado River, I caught them on 2 different baits. The first one was a Rapala DT6 in a color called Caribbean Shad, chartreuse blueback. I used that to cover water between targets. When I didn't see anything, I would throw that thing out there. But those Guads loved isolated targets, rocks, stumps, pipes that shot current out. And for those target situations, I used a bait that imitates what a lot of those Guadalupe bass feed on, and that is crawfish. I used the 3/8 ounce. It's a Missile Jigs mini flip jig. And when you look at that jig, it's very compact. It's got a small profile, 3/8 ounce, thin skirt, little package. And to complement that jig, I wanted a trailer that matched the same size. I used Berkeley Power Bait Chigger Crawl in the 3-inch, used a green pumpkin style color, but I also bit it down to make it match. And I bite one segment down on that 3-inch Chigger Crawl. I thread that on that 3/8 ounce Missile Jigs mini flip, and when you look at it, look at the package here. It's a perfect, small, compact jig. Looks just like those crawfish that the Guadalupe were feeding on in the lower Colorado River. Caught a nice Guad, about 2 pounds, and that completed my bucket list for Austin, Texas. Man, I hope you liked the show, and listen to me. If you missed episodes, feel free to go back anytime. Go back on DVR, go back on the Nat Geo Wild channel, and look at those old episodes. While you're there, leave a comment. If there's a city that you want me to visit, let me know. Let me know through my social media, or let Nat Geo Wild know on their channel. Hope you enjoyed the Fish My City from Austin, Texas. See you next week.